Great. Okay, so hello. My actual name is David Staffel, or Starfool on Discord. I also sometimes go by Animals and Things, which is a Photoshop project where I Photoshop animals into things. So I have a background in graphic design, but why should you listen to me talk about game dev? Well, perhaps a little different from most people in the community. I've been working as an escape room designer for the past 10 years. So my experience is very much in the physical side of things rather than digital. But I think a lot of the themes are transferable. To date, I've created puzzles, graphics, narratives, and managed production for around 30 games. So anyway, the title of my talk today is Overcoming the Creative Slump, Finding Inspiration Everywhere. Why did I choose this topic, first of all? Well, firstly, I am a big fan of games that take mundane aspects of life and turn them into engaging experiences, although not so much these types of games. They definitely have a place if you're into that, but I prefer them to be a little bit more wacky and obscure like these ones. And the second reason is because I see a lot of this alongside this. Now, I just want to stress that I'm not saying that a game is automatically going to fail because the genre is saturated, but I do think that there is a common trend of new developers wanting to make a game just because there was that one game that was, really popular. But listen, the most important thing is to make something that you like, as long as you have fun. I mean, it doesn't really matter what you make. It's still good practice. And even if you do fail, you'll inevitably learn a lot from it. So anyway, back to the topic at hand, finding inspiration. I thought that it would be fun if I took you on a couple of journeys to show you what I mean. So let's just assume it's the weekend and you decide that you're going to go for a walk. You're walking down the road and you notice that one of your neighbour's front gardens is really overgrown. It looks almost post-apocalyptic, needs a trim, you think. You continue on and you decide that you're going to grab a coffee from your favourite place. As you're waiting inside, you take note of how chatty that the barista is with all the customers. You grab your coffee and you head off towards the park. As you arrive, you almost immediately, your attention is captured by the honking noise of a goose. You turn around and you see that there is one terrorizing some people having a picnic. In the middle of the park is a pond, so you decide you're going to sit on a nearby bench and watch the ducks a bit. On the bench, someone has left a magnifying glass, so you also happen to see a large frog by the water's edge. Perhaps the magnifying glass belongs to the frog. Okay, that last one is a little bit far-fetched, but it could happen. So most of you probably recognize at least one game from that list. I said that I would walk you through a couple of journeys. For this next one, I thought that I would put my money where my mouth was and come up with some ideas of my own. So just let me preface this by saying that I do not claim that any of these are good ideas. So this time, let's imagine that it's a working day. So you're about to head off to work. You can't find your keys anywhere, or your shoes, or your wallet, or your jacket. You're really, really forgetful. So how about a point and click adventure about trying to navigate your house, finding your things? You could also extend it to cover the rest of the day, like where did you park your car, which way you would go to work. Maybe half the game could be you navigating the inside of your brain, unlocking memories. I don't know. You're so forgetful that you forgot that your work is actually remote. Perhaps you work remotely for a customer service agent for a shoe company. Your day revolves around dealing with inquiries and complaints via telephone, email, live chat, that kind of thing. And you also have to have regular Zoom meetings. So it sounds perfect for a game, right? Perhaps you score or you lose experience points depending on your responses to customers each day, your contributions to meeting, you get promotions, you get extra money. Perhaps you can spend the money on improving customer service streams. customer service abilities by reading, having coaching sessions, or even cheating by integrating chatbots to your work. Whoops. So after work, you decide that you're going to watch some TV. There's a documentary to watch on dogs. So as you're watching it, you imagine how about an action adventure game where you gain little dog companions, each one giving you a different ability. So you got your Yorkshire Terrier, gives you super hearing, Bloodhound gives you super smelling, I don't know, Whippet makes you really fast. Perhaps the dogs could actually give you some kind of like hybrid powers. Obviously, your enemies are cats. Cats. So you go to bed with your head full of thoughts and you sleep badly. You have the same weird recurring dreams of your teeth falling out. That happens a lot to me. So let's make a game exactly about that, a mouth management sim where you're rushing to different parts of the mouth, trying to stop the teeth from falling. Oh, by the way, I'm really sorry about all the AI art that I'm using. It was just the quickest way that I could get these up. So yeah, you are taking part in mini games, perhaps, or little challenges. So there we go. I never said that they were good ideas, by the way. But hopefully it gives you an idea of how we can find inspiration. Yeah, sorry about that. I'll quit to the next one. So the next slide, I just wanted to point out that it is important to make a distinction between theme and genre. So in this, I only really covered theming, but when it comes to being inspired for what style your game, I think it's a little bit more rigid. After all, it's a bit more limited. I am a big fan of mixing genres. However, I think that's a topic for another talk. So in summary, don't just make something because you think that it will make you rich, unless it's for practice. Do something that you like. And if you're struggling for inspiration, just go for a walk. Thank you. That's the end. Questions? Do you know what? I knew someone was going to ask this question, and unfortunately, I couldn't think of anything, which is terrible. But I do go out often thinking about things that I look at. Gosh, why didn't I come up with something for that? Just a lie. But yeah, unfortunately not. I don't have any examples, not off the top of my head anyway. I'll get back to you. Do you prefer to look at lots of things or a few things deeply? Probably a little bit of both, to be honest. I have ADHD, so my mind is constantly on overdrive, and I do find myself looking at a lot of things a lot. But if something catches my attention with intent, then I will probably think about it quite deeply. How about any other project, even if not for escape rooms specifically? I think off the top of my head, I probably couldn't come up with something. Maybe I'll get back to you later about that. How do you judge whether an idea you have is good or not? Feedback, really. I think asking people. It depends what you mean about the idea. Like, is the idea for a puzzle or is it for a game or something else? I think probably need to be more specific about that. But generally, it's feedback, whether that's testing with people or just asking their opinion. I don't have a question. Just want you to link some of your stuff in general chat after. Okay, I'll do that. I've got a portfolio with most of the stuff on, so I can send that. Yeah. I'm really going to be thinking about how I've used this in real life. Oh, by the way, also, I had 10 examples of games for both journeys originally, and my slides were like 120 before I decided that I really need to cut down. Yeah, the iteration thing is really important. 20 seconds. No, but I said at the beginning that I only work sort of in physical, but I'm actually going back to uni to do a master's in game design, and I really want to focus on gamification. I really feel very passionate about gamification.
Hello everyone, I'm JZook12, and today I'm going to be telling you about spreadsheet prototyping. But before we get into what that is, let's go over a familiar scenario, where you have a great new idea for a game, you jump in Engine to start prototyping, but you find yourself spending a lot of time building up your game's systems, rather than actually testing it. And even when you do test it, then you find yourself back in Engine to debug, build up new mechanics, and you're not spending as much time as you would like finding your game's identity. One common solution to this is to paper prototype, where you make a physical version of your game, and you can do really quick building and iteration. This is something some friends and I did for a crazy tic-tac-toe game we made. We went out, bought poster board, index card, and markers, and just made our game. Whenever we wanted to tweak numbers, or if we wanted to add a whole bunch of new crazy rules, we could just write over some index cards or say, this is the way the game works now. And as simple and as easy as that, we had a new version for people to try out right then and there. Now, one limitation about this is that you really can't do it over the internet. It's only in person. But that's where spreadsheet prototyping comes in handy. We're using something like Google Sheets. You can prototype over the internet. This version of the tic-tac-toe game I made in no more than about 5 minutes. And with just that little time, I can show the game to anyone I want. So I'm now going to go over some other spreadsheet prototypes I've done. This one is for an escape room style puzzle game, where each room in the escape room had its own sheet. And then each sheet had a map of the room, as well as some rules and notes. Now, in an actual game, the player with their camera would be able to see that something is a desk or a whiteboard. Using UI or object highlighting, they'd be able to tell what they can interact with and what the rules of the game are. But you don't have that in a spreadsheet, so you have to adapt. I got a bit more verbose, specifically calling out what objects were, making a written rules section and some notes. And yeah, then from there, it just played like a game of Dungeons and Dragons, where I was the dungeon master, they're the player, and through conversation, we figure out what the player wants to do. They tell me, I tell them what did or didn't work and what's possible or not. And then as they're going, what I do is I have my own game master sheet that has some diagrams as well as some conversation logs that I copy and paste into the player's notes section when they need it, as well as some other key information for myself to keep things smooth. And yeah, I tried it out with a bunch of people. They really seemed to enjoy it. And when I had to change puzzle solutions, or if I had to add or modify rooms, I didn't have to spend a lot of time in engine grayboxing or writing scripts. I could just spend a few minutes fiddling around in a spreadsheet and pass it right on to the next person. Simple as that. So for this last prototype I want to show you, it's a bit more of an in-depth one. I'm going to do a bit of a live demo here for a turn-based combat system that I made pretty recently. So let's go over how it works. This front landing page here is the gameplay sheet, and this is where the player is going to spend the vast majority of their time. The left side here are all the stats. The bottom is the inventory and their current attacks. And then in the center, they use drop-down menus to select their current turn. Now, for the drop-down menus for their attacks at the bottom here, this is every attack available in the game. And where it gets all this information for attacks and stats are through data tables in the back. Each column is a different attack, with each row being a different stat, and adding a new attack is as easy as adding a new column. The same works for items, same works for enemies. Add a new column, and it's in the game. Now, while the player's setting up their turn, I'm over here setting up enemy turns in the combat info screen with very similar drop-down menus. There's a bunch of other information lower on the screen, but you don't really need to worry about it. It's just a summary of combat info pulled from these data tables during gameplay. Really, up here is all that I'm worried about. Now, once the player and I are done setting up all the turns, I just run through and click all of these blue attack buttons. They're hooked up to some macros that go over to this calculation sheet, which does some number crunching, pulls the damage and healing numbers, and then applies them to the relevant targets back in combat info. And just with some drop-down menus and a few clicks of a button, a turn of combat is over. Now, to show you really how this works in practice and how easily you can try out some new abilities, we're going to do an example. We're going to make a new attack called New Attack, give it a power rating of 5, and say that it targets 2 enemies. So if we go back over to the player, we now see New Attack is available. And you can select it right here, select target 1, select target 2. Now what I'm going to do on my second monitor is I'm going to go to that macro button I was telling you about earlier, and I'm going to give it a nice click. And in a few moments, you should see the results of that attack pop up right here. There we go in the combat log. Each hit for 45 damage. We see both enemies have lost 45 health, showing that it worked. Now this is a pretty cool part where I click over here and keep an eye on the selected attack over there, because on my second monitor, I'm going to go through and modify the attack. I'm going to lower its attack power and then add some healing and drop the target too. And then we'll go over here and let me just hit that combat attack button. And if we give it a few moments, there we go. 15 damage, healed 5. If we jump back over to combat info, they lost 15 health, showing that it worked out. So I know I went over a lot pretty quickly here. Just like there in a minute, we made a new attack, tried it, tweaked it, and tried it again. But I'm hoping that even though it was a bit, that you kind of have an idea of what's possible with spreadsheets. And now you may be thinking, it's great that I know all this is possible, but how do I do it myself? And I can give you 3 pieces of advice there. First is just to try it. I didn't know if any of this was possible or even how to do it when I started doing this. It was just an idea that I had, and it happened to work out. Second is feel free to reach out to me for any questions or advice. I'd be more than willing to give you a run through as to how these things work, a bit more in depth, do a practice playthrough, and troubleshoot with you. Last but not least, I would say is to think outside the box, because even if you have a game that you don't think would work on paper or in a spreadsheet, who knows what other medium you can make a game work in. You don't know really unless you try. So, thank you. Does anyone have any questions? I don't think I'm on a level none of you will ever reach, Dotwell. I think give it a shot. Like I said, I didn't know how to do any of this about a year ago, and just kind of jumped in. Are these publicly available? They're on my Google Drive. I could try to set something up and post it here in the Discord or something like that. And as I said, if anyone wants to actually see anything more in depth, I'd be more than happy to do that. You can code, yes, you can code, you can do spreadsheets. Exactly, GK. Have you tried something like Miro or other drawing boards? I have not. I never really admittedly looked into that, so that's good to know that something like that exists. Do I think this works for most types of games or in generally a few genres? Only a few pop to mind, personally, but that's just me. I'm sure other people could sit down and think for a while and come up with genres that I'm not thinking of. The ones that I think work best, off the top of my head, are games like the Tic-Tac-Toe one, which is a paper game to begin with. Anything that suits itself to more theater of the mind or narrative type stuff, I think works as well. Outside of just playing around, I don't have any personal thoughts on, to answer Walvis's question, do you know any resources of how to do this outside of just playing around and asking you? I know there are people online who like do Excel specifically tutorials or Google Sheets tutorials. There's also some documentation on those sorts of things. I would say, like, if I ever wanted to know how do I do this in Excel, I would just kind of look it up. What resources did I learn? As I said, I would Google things if needed. I would look up YouTube videos if needed, but otherwise, I just kind of fiddled around. Will it run Crisis? I don't think so. Probably going to struggle. Yeah, action games I can see being a bit tougher. It's probably possible. But yeah, resources. I can try to find some things and post them if people are interested, of people that I've seen before. Not immediately jump out, though. Resource list would be great. Yeah, I can try to pull something up. What were you doing before this? I mean, doing stuff still in like Unity in terms of game development, still building stuff in Unity. Honestly, the turn-based combat one is my side project. So I kind of jump back and forth. Day job is mechanical engineering. So not so much this. Yeah, I think my time is just about up. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate you listening.
I hope people can see that. Neato.
I cannot see it, so
Oh, it really is your turn to have a bad day with Discord, isn't it?
Oh no. Okay, right. Let's fucking do this. Okay, just started the timer. Right, hello, my name is Sophie, and this is a presentation about my approach to game design, specifically trying to make a commercial game with artistic merit. I want to preface this presentation by saying that this is not the right way to go about this, just how I'm doing it. But to be honest, I have no experience or success doing this, so, you've been warned. And also I should mention, I literally just finished this presentation, so, who knows how it'll go. With that out of the way, let's get to it. Next slide. Like Denis Villeneuve's recent Dune films, this presentation comes to you in two parts. Next slide. Part 1, having ideas. So, when playing games, I try to think deeply about them and deconstruct them as I'm playing to figure out what works for me, what doesn't, and why. As a result, over time, I've built up a whole bunch of ideas about mechanics and why they work. A game maker's toolkit, you could say. Over time, I've naturally started seeing how mechanics work well together, how they can clash, and which naturally lends itself to coming up with game ideas that haven't quite been done before and I would like to play. However, this causes the problem of quote-unquote impossible itches, because now there are games that I want to play that do not exist. Because this process is riffing heavily on things that already exist, it leads to ideas that are familiar but different, that often work well commercially, and because you're doing something different, you're making a contribution to the medium. Also, because you're riffing on things that already exist, it's easier to maintain a clear and consistent direction and vision, instead of getting lost trying to pursue something abstract or out of reach. Right, next slide. Part 2, execution. Next slide. So, case study, Robot Reckoning. This is the game that I'm currently working on. My current project came about in this way of coming up with ideas. Probably my two favorite genres of game are physics-based games and action games, and I've long wanted to combine them. On the face of it, these genres are quite different, but if you break them down, they actually have a lot of similarities. For starters, they both have a lot of spectacle involved, whether it's the big explosions or satisfying sims of physics games, or the stylish finishes in action games. They both have similar core gameplay loops of planning, tension building, and release. For example, in physicsy heist game Teardown, you might knock down a tower to turn it into a bridge. You might plan to knock down a tower to turn it into a bridge. Feel your anticipation build as you place your bombs in the right spot at the base of the tower. And then when you set the bombs off, get the satisfaction of seeing an explosion, and hopefully your plan work out. Just like how in action games, you make a plan for how you'll defeat your attackers, tension rises as you try to execute the plan without failing, and then the encounter ends with the relief of survival, maybe capped off with an epic super move. Lastly, both genres have a lot of room for self-expression. Going back to the Teardown example, you can make a bridge out of a tower, but because it's a physics sim, it's super flexible, so you can probably find 10 different ways to make a bridge out of something in any given scenario. In action games, your character often has a wide variety of moves and modifiers that you can combine into unique fighting style. Playing the Spider-Man games, for example, I often feel like the director of my own Spider-Man movie. The main difference between these genres, and this is where the challenge of combining them comes in, is pace. Physics games are flexible because they rely heavily on simulations that have a life of their own, but that can be unwieldy and chaotic. So the best physics games tend to have a fairly slow pace to them so that you can control the simulation. Meanwhile, action games are about, action, so they're fast-paced. Next slide. Iteration with serendipity. Getting over this challenge is where, for me, serendipity came in. My initial attempt to execute this physics action idea was that the player was a ball and you could roll around, and it wasn't easy to change direction, so there would be pegs that were part of the level that you could hook onto and swing around. And I just couldn't get the mechanic to feel good, and it relied heavily on level design, which isn't one of my strong suits. And a few months later, I was taking part in the 2021 GMTK Game Jam, and the theme was Joined Together, which made me think of two characters joined together. No, sorry, don't click. I forgot, I didn't have time to put bullet points on this slide, so it's blank. Then a few months later, I was taking part in the 2021 GMDC Game Jam, and the theme was Joined Together, which made me think of two characters joined together, and then I realized one of those characters should be a wrecking ball, and the peg it swings around is the player character. I worked on that game with fellow server member Arcade Engineer, and it went great, and I was really happy with the result. My physics action itch was finally scratched. Although I wanted to develop it into a full game at the time, but I wasn't really sure how. At about 18 months after that, I made a new friend who's a game designer. We got talking about that jam game, and they observed that it would benefit from more ways to control the wrecking ball. Luckily, I had just got done playing the newest Need for Speed game, and that series has a lot of ideas about speed control that I could just straight up steal, and I continued to iterate on Robot Reckoning from there to where it is today. Although it's true that you can't quite rely on serendipity as part of your process, the fact that I had the core idea built up means that when something relevant came up, I could apply it to the game. Next slide. So these circles represent the different audiences that your game can reach. At the center, there's you. Your game, assuming the core idea appeals to you, probably doesn't have to be super developed to appeal to you. Like I said, I was happy with the jam version of my game, but there's no tutorial. It barely tells you what the controls. There's like one stage, one enemy type, and so on. It scratched my itch, but nobody's going to pay money for it. Then there's freaks like you. This is a very small group of people who have the exact same taste as you. If you're making a commercial game and you're just trying to appease these people, you probably won't sell very many copies. Then there's your core audience. These people will need more than just the bare bones game to get stuck into, but they'll appreciate what you're doing and maybe even evangelize your game for you. Then there's a wide audience. Unless you're playing it incredibly safe design-wise and have a massive marketing budget, it's very difficult to reach a wide audience intentionally without making your game kind of bland. And so if you do manage to reach a wide audience, you'll often find what they like about your game isn't what you like about your game. They might enjoy it, but they're unlikely to get it. However, if you want your game to sell, you need to be able to reach into this audience, at least somewhat. So the red circle here represents your target, where you've expanded the appeal of the game enough by, say, adding tutorials, difficulty settings, and content, but still not going too far away from what appeals to you and your core audience about the idea. And that's the presentation. I didn't end it that well because I threw it together very quickly. Any thoughts, questions, etc.? How do you know where in the circle your game is in? How do you design it with that in mind? I mean, it's more about like, you have the core idea. Like I said, if you have a game that's just like a prototype, basically, even if it scratches your itch, not many people are going to want to play it. So you need to build out like a tutorial to teach people how to play it and, you know, add content so that it has like some longevity or maybe replay value, etc. Yeah. Were there big shift in direction in your game where you realize the current idea just doesn't work? Yeah, I mean, I kind of described that before. I mean, it's been kind of a straight line, to be honest, since I started working on it again, like 18 months after Jam. So I guess the answer is no. Where can we see your work? Starfool, I have in the playtesting channel. You can play the latest alpha of Robot Reckoning, but the full demo will be out quite soon, so you may as well wait for that. How do you decide what concessions to make when finding your place within that circle? What are some painful concessions you've had to make? Very good question. I mean, it's kind of vibes based. It's like you have to know what appeals to you about your game's idea, and then you have to think critically when making any addition or changes. You have to think, does this affect the core appeal of this game to me? So I remember like the chief who playtested my game, he really wanted it to be like faster paced. But for me, that kind of like, that wasn't the idea behind the game. Like the game is sort of, it's an action game, but it's somewhat slower. It's more tactical. And so, you know, it's not a fast paced game. So I just didn't put in that option. I considered doing it an option, but I just haven't put in that option. And in terms of painful concessions, I almost had some painful concessions around difficulty, but I've actually changed the difficulties. Like I specifically designed difficulty settings that would not be painful concessions to me, but would still be helpful to new players that are struggling. So careful design, I guess, is basically the answer.
Okay, so I'm mostly just talking about one of the games I made. Still working on it a bit, but so having a deep understanding of your game, specifically talking from a mechanics perspective, and using this understanding to enhance gameplay. So approach development with a strong gameplay idea, and get your prototype done and play a lot of your game. As you do this, you'll uncover additional layers of complexity as you improve at your own game that might surprise you. So the example I'm using for today is of Suika Shapes, it's basically a version of Suika game with a lot more features. You match shapes together by color, they combine and grow bigger, and if it overflows in the box, then you lose. So as you play the game, your understanding might develop like this. So you start by just matching fruit where you can on one side and then putting what you can't match on the other side. You might realize something like covering up unmerged shapes is bad because you'll run out of space very quickly. And later on, it might take a long time for you to learn a lot of the more advanced physics interactions and tricks that you can use to overcome bad luck. So here's an example of that. So rotating it into a very specific spot and dropping it so it like merges and then slides down, causing a big chain reaction of merging. So yeah, as you play the different games, everybody's progression of understanding these advanced mechanics is going to be different. It might come to you very quickly, or you might have to play a lot before you see some of the finer details or even the bigger picture, so stay open-minded. First week of Shapes, I decided the best part to focus on was using physics knowledge in creative ways to overcome tricky situations. So you can now use this understanding to work backward from there to make various decisions about what variables should be. So, for example, the physics settings, gravity, will it use 2D or 3D physics engine? You know, what would be best to allow players to use the physics in the most creative ways to match shapes, and what additional mechanics can I add to emphasize this is another good question. So, of course, the different shape types is the most obvious thing. Simple geometric differences cause very different layouts of the box. Just like this, you might not predict with just right triangles you get such a complex structure, but there you are. Precise indicators for rotation and precise rotation abilities is just one of the more obvious ones. Helps a lot. And one of the a more subtle example is the rules of what happens when shapes merge. So there are a lot of things you can choose to, for example, preserve the velocity of the combined shape, the rotation, the shape type, and I don't preserve the velocity, but the shape type and rotation I do preserve, and that lets you use the physics in a lot more creative ways and be a lot more strategical with your placement of dropping things in, so it doesn't feel so random. It gives players more control to take back their win chance from the randomness of getting, like, it gives you random shapes to work with, so yeah. This adds a lot more depth to the game and lets people play for a lot longer. And taking a step back, so we looked at the finer mechanics, but when you're designing new modes, you have to take a step back and think about the game as a whole and the flow from start to finish. So I designed versus multiplayer for us Week of Shapes. And the big question is, how do you allow players to apply pressure to each other without going too far and ruining the feel of the single player experience? So the rules I decided on are higher score always wins, and you can be eliminated early, preventing you from getting extra points. And just because I'm going fast, summary, the lessons that I learned are, it works best if you really keep the single player feel and follow a similar flow. You want the climax to be when the box is almost full, and when you reach the final sort of shape tier, which is like a watermelon or suica in my game. Reversing progress or disturbing the state of the game by throwing in extra objects as an attack that you can do, it kind of goes directly against it. With this in mind, how should players attack each other? What should the attacks do? I decided to go for making the box size dynamic. So the floor goes up or down based on who has an advantage, basically. And there's a new combo system where you want to basically build these structures where there are a bunch of shapes in order in a row, so you can send a quick combo. And it's per shape, basically, so you can't just spam and make a combo. So this rewards rotating and placing the shapes well, using the physics well. And here's just an example, all the shapes in order, you drop it to chain them together. So with other systems, what are some problems you might run into? Having just a hard time limit, race against a clock, like you have 5 minutes, whoever gets a higher score wins. It feels very abrupt, there's no sort of player interaction. The game doesn't respond to actually what happens. sending fruit into the other player's box. For this game in particular, it's a puzzle game where a single misplaced fruit or shape can kind of ruin the entire game for you. So I decided to stay far away from that. And deleting objects or downgrading them, it takes the timing of the climax away from what I think is the best part of the game and trying to aim to create a watermelon. It's like what the title is about. So you have to be careful if you want to go that route. So instead, I looked for ways to enhance the feel of the classic mode, like fighting for extra space and strategically placing your shapes. So in summary, of course, play your game a lot. Look at a smaller level. Find what to focus on a smaller level for designing the core of the game. Take a step back and find what to focus on from a bigger picture if you're trying to design modes. And every step of the way, be asking yourself, how do these decisions relate back to the focus that I decided on? And yeah, that's my talk. Here are my games. Slime releasing soon on Steam. Speak of Shapes is already out, and my social media. Any questions I will take now. And I have some videos on the multiplayer more in detail on my YouTube channel if you're interested. Inspirations behind Slime are Getting Over It and Jump King, Fred and Fred, and Pogo Stuck. So yeah, I'd say mostly Getting Over It's more of like a high data transfer. Like you're very particularly controlling a limb, but it's two limbs because you play with the controller instead. But it definitely leans into some of the difficulty that you get out of Jump King and Pogo Stuck. Jump King, where you're like really falling a long time, and Pogo Stuck, it's just a really difficult game to take inspiration from. Thank you. It's one of the really brutal types of games, so might not be everybody's favorite, but I'm looking to make additional modes that maybe make it a bit more accessible. I'm thinking about that right now, what I want to do for the final. Oh, and a difficult game about climbing. That came out after I was basically done the original kind of flow of the game, so yes, it's not for the it's a difficult game. Oh, and for art direction, I guess Kirby's Epic Yarn a little bit. Take some inspiration for that for the backgrounds, but try to add some decorations. I like how they did their art design for the backgrounds and stuff. I could honestly take a bit more from it. Biggest inspiration for Suika Shapes? Yes, I did. I did not see that. Sorry. Well, that's Suika Game, and yeah, basically just Suika Game and Tetris. Modern Tetris, multiplayer Tetris for the versus mode, and just a Suika Game. So, yeah.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for sticking around for the final talk of GMDC. I've lost the D. The D is gone from my logo. Sorry. 2024. So, my name's Mark Brown, and my talk is how to get stuff done. Because, like I say, my name's Mark, and I run a small YouTube channel called Game Maker's Toolkit. I am in the process of finishing up my first proper Steam indie game. I do consulting, design consulting for studios. I do talks and keynotes, and I'm running a rather large game jam. Starts August 16th. Everyone join the jam. Hooray, exciting. So I do a lot of stuff, and this is just in work time. I also have a real life, and I protect it. This is a rare occurrence of me doing something at the weekend, so you're welcome. And so, I am a busy bee, and I have had to make sure that I get to do all of the stuff that I want to do and finish all the projects I want to do and take on all the opportunities that I can. I've had to come up with loads of ways to wrangle my stupid brain and make sure that I am motivated and excited about the projects and get stuff done and bring things to completion. And so I've come up with loads of tips and techniques and strategies throughout my career, but I want to share just 3 of them with you today. So let's jump into the first one, which is called the crappy draft. This is tip number 1. And so this idea is basically the first time that you do basically anything. And I don't just mean like the very first time you take something on, but like just every time you do something. So for example, I've done 200 YouTube videos, but still the first time I write that script for the first time for the 201st video, it's still going to suck. It's still going to have loads of problems. I'm still going to throw away that draft and do another one. This is just, no matter how experienced you are, the first draft is usually kind of bad, and you need to, if you're taking it seriously, throw it away and start again. And also there's this idea that like, I don't, you've probably had this experience of like doing, the first time you do something, you go have this distinct feeling of like, oh man, knowing what I know now, if I started again, I would be able to do this so much better. Like I've got like a much better way of doing this now. Like you learn so much about doing the thing by doing the thing. And so the idea with the crappy draft is to just like accept that the first time is just going to be awful. The first time is just going to be thrown away, and just like lean into it as much as possible and like speed through that, like speed run it. So like when I'm writing the scripts for Game Maker's Toolkit, like the first time is just like stream of consciousness, just full of spelling mistakes and factual errors and sentences that don't end. And I'm just getting things from my brain onto the paper and just getting it done so that I can then move on to that second draft where I've got the bad ideas out of the way. I've learned so much about how to do it better, and the second draft will be so much better. So the idea of the crappy draft is just speeding up that first draft as much as possible by just accepting that it's going to suck and just knuckling on down and getting through it. And so this could be, a script, it could be a programming script, it could be a drawing, a tile map, whatever it is, get that first draft done quickly. The second tip is this idea of making things more bite-sized and using treats. So basically this idea is when you think about doing a new project, whether it's making a video game or making a YouTube video or starting a YouTube channel or writing a book or whatever it is, it can feel like a massive task, overwhelming, just like so big that it's just daunting, and you don't want to even begin because it's just too scary. So, the idea is that you can pretty much every project like this, you can break it down into smaller chunks. So a YouTube video is not necessarily like I'm going to make a YouTube video, but what it really means is I'm going to research a topic, and then I'm going to write the script, and then I'm going to record my voice or record myself on camera, and then I'm going to edit it together. So breaking it down into smaller, bite-sized, more manageable, more easy to tackle chunks can be a lot more motivating. And actually, you can go even further sort of subtask than this. So like when it comes to editing a video, I found myself opening up Adobe Premiere, seeing, a 30-minute timeline that I've got to fill with video clips, and just being like, oh my God, I'm going to quit this YouTube channel. This is a disaster. But what I actually have found myself doing is really, thoughtfully, cognizantly breaking it up into much smaller tasks, like literally saying that, like, instead of it being a 30-minute video, it's a 5-minute intro that I need to edit, and then a 5-minute chapter 1 and a 5-minute conclusion, and like physically putting it on my to-do list as these individual tasks is just so much easier to get through and more motivating. And then that can be like improved even further, I find, with the small little like treats and rewards and just kind of and breaks, basically. So like I do an chapter edit, and then I allow myself to eat something nice or go for a walk, maybe watch a YouTube video, play a round of Balatro or Spelunky or something, just something to like take my mind off the task, have a bit of a break, and then you get straight back into it again. So it's a really like motivating cycle. And then tip number 3 is to think about your personal motivation curve. So for me personally, I know that on the first day I start a new project, the first line of code I write, the first idea I have for a YouTube video, I'm excited, I'm pumped, I'm down for it. This is going to be the best thing ever. I'm going to work on this forever. I can't wait. It's going to be great. By about like a month and a bit, I am just done with it. I'm sick of this idea. I hate it. I want to move on. Why did I even start this? This is a dumb idea. Let's do another one. This is stupid. But this is, there's basically this sort of linear, just complete fall off of motivation over time. I've just come to accept this about myself, and it's just like fine. And just kind of being really aware of this and then building that into my process. So for instance, when I need to do something that's kind of like the hard and creative bits, I make sure I get them done early when I'm most motivated. So in the context of like a YouTube video, you think about like the crazy motion graphics you might see in my videos, or some like montage or something kind of complicated. I get that done really soon at the beginning when I know that I've got that excitement. I know that I'm pumped and ready to do it. And then I can leave, like really like think about leaving the stuff that is just kind of tedious and simple and robotic to the end. So it's like, you know, those little like tags that appear at the top of my videos that say what the game name is and the year it came out. Like, I don't need to think about that. I don't need to be creative. I can just like, you know, at the end of the project, I'm absolutely sick of it, but I can at least get them done, because it doesn't matter if I'm motivated or not. They're just going to be put on the screen. Whereas if I leave something creative, like a you know, a crazy boss keys graph to the end of the project, it's going to look like this presentation. It's going to be completely phoned in. So knowing where my motivation is going to be at any point in the project is really important. I also can think about this in terms of like which projects I take on. So a YouTube video is perfect for me, right? I can, it basically fits perfectly within that motivation curve. A very small game like Platformer Toolkit, also like a Netflix documentary, like that's I'd love to do that. It sounds like a fascinating thing to do. It'd be fantastic. I know that it would completely be much longer than my motivation would last. So I just do not tackle that sort of thing. However, there is like one remedy, which is breaks. So this is basically how I've got my game Mind of a Magnet done, which is letting my motivation curve. You know, I'm excited, I'm programming, I'm doing cool things, I'm sick of it, I hate it, take a break. Literally, you know, this is why this game has taken so long. I've taken 5-6 months breaks. Take a big long break, do something else, let motivation come back a bit, come back into it. I'm excited, yeah, this game's gonna be amazing. I hate it, it's terrible. Break, excitement, break. It doesn't last forever. This is why the game is coming out, but it is a way to kind of increase that curve a little bit. But I think the ultimate productivity tip, and I think this is the important thing I want to end on, because there's so much productivity advice, advice for how to get more done, and self-help books and that sort of stuff. But it's so easy to like take someone else's way of working and productivity and be like, yeah, I'll copy that. But ultimately, you really have to think about your own brain, your own way of working, what motivates you, what demotivates you, what keeps you excited, all these sorts of things. Be aware of it, be mindful of it, be cognizant of it, and see what works and go for it. Like, for example, you've seen me on the Discord. I wake up at like 5 a.m. I work, at that time, I'm getting the most of my stuff done. And you might be like, oh man, if I want to be, Mr. Game Maker's Toolkit, I've got to set my alarm for 4:30. I've got a beat mark to the punch. But actually, maybe you just work better like in the evening. You just, enjoy your day, and then 7 p.m. rolls around and it's like, this is my time. I'm a night owl. I want to be working while the moon's up. And if that works for you, that works for you. It's great. So you just got to try different tips, try different things. And if something works, put that into your productivity toolkit. And if it doesn't work, it's fine. It's just, your own personal way of working. So take people's advice and try it. But if it doesn't work for you, it doesn't work for you. So there we go. So any questions? Sorry, did I miss the time check? I wasn't looking. My 10 minutes is up a minute ago. Oh, I'm so sorry. Thank you. This was fun. Dotwo says, how do you approach the balance of motivation / perspiration, just sticking through it? I try not to, like, if I, it depends. If you're in that sort of situation where you've got like an actual deadline, you've got a boss breathing down your neck, that's obviously one thing. But in my position, I'm very lucky where, like, if I'm not feeling it, I just like put it off, take a break, and come back to it later, because it is so hard. It's so, like, the work that you do when you're not motivated just is like walking through custard. It takes so long. It's probably just going to be bad because you're not into it. And so it's like, it's not even worth doing. Now, if you do have to push on through, then you're good luck. You got to just like find some ways, like maybe giving yourself small breaks here, or give yourself rewards and breaking the thing down into more manageable chunks. But for me, it's just like, yeah, if I've got it, the more I'm feeling it, the better the thing's going to be. Jizuku12 says, how do you force yourself to take those breaks? I always find I have a hard time pulling myself away. Oh man, I mean, like, I think it's like worth like forcing yourself to do it once and then realizing you'll hopefully see just how beneficial it is. Like, I'm the kind of the same sometimes, especially when I'm like high in the motivation curve and I'm not, I'm excited. I don't want to take a break, but then you do, and ideas start flowing because you're not like consciously thinking about it. The ideas start coming and you come back with this renewed like excitement for it. And it really is like just doing it a few times shows you how great it is. Sorry, let me scroll my mouse. Jonah says, had no idea you're such a morning person. I've got myself in a bit of a pickle at the moment where I'm literally waking up at 4:30, which is not ideal. It used to be 6 a.m. I don't know how, then it became 5. Now it's getting silly, but yeah. Amit says, have you ever gotten far along making a video and just been like, nah, this isn't working, cancel it? Yeah, a few times. Yeah, quite a few. Well, not quite a few, but a few times. Just like, if it's gotten to the point where I'm like, I'm happy with the video, but I'm just like not excited to work on it anymore, then finding ways to just kind of wrap it up a bit faster. But yeah, there's definitely been videos where I'm just like, you know what, I don't think this is going to fit my channel. An example I did once was like, I was making a video about like clicker games, idle games, and about like how they're designed, and then it's like, I don't like them at all. I think they're kind of a bit gross, especially like more the free to play stuff. And I'm just like, do I want to be, talking about this sort of thing on my channel where I don't even believe in it? Like, it was interesting to look at the history of them and stuff, but like, yeah. And how do you find time to game while doing a load of work on a game, says Sam. Yeah, I mean, I'm finding that a little bit tricky. Like, my motivation to play games, like, I haven't played a lot recently just because I've been so focused on Mind Over Magnet. But I do find giving myself a specific, I know I'm just completely overrunning time, this is hilarious. Giving myself a specific time, like, in my calendar, so like Saturday mornings is my like play new games time. So this morning I played Dungeons of Hinterberg, and I played World of Goo 2, and I played what the heck was that? The Kitsune Tales, and so just like putting up my calendar, it becomes like a little ritual thing. Yeah, it's kind of a good way of doing it. Lady Alice says, don't you have a problem where it's hard to pick a project back up again after a break? Yes, sometimes, but I find actually you have to just do it, right? It can be very like, you can get very much in your head about it, of being like, oh man, I haven't worked on it for a long time, and how am I going to get, pick up all this spaghetti code or whatever? Like, oh man, it's been a while, maybe I should just add a bit more break. Like, but if you just get into it and do it and like force yourself, like within a little while, you're like, oh yeah, I remember why I enjoyed working on this. I remember why I started this in the first place, and so that kind of brings it up. How do you work up your motivation to start a project? Is there planning involved? The start, for me, I never need motivation because I only start a project because I am excited about something. So it's just like, oh, I've got an idea for a video, or, oh man, let's make a cool game or whatever. And it's just like, I'm onto it. I'm excited. And if I don't have that initial spark, then I'm not going to be motivated. Docway says, do you have a way to rebuild motivation actively over a long period of time, or do you prefer to let it be a passive process? Yeah, kind of that answer of just all my projects context. All of my projects die when I return to them and realize I just hate the project. They were not coming back with the right frame of mind. I haven't really had that, luckily. I've been very fortunate. I mean, the main one it has been Mind Over Magnet. And I just feel like when I'm away from it, I have like some of the best ideas, and I'm excited to get back into it. And so maybe if you are going back to the project and you're just not that motivated, then maybe it is simply not working out and it is not the right project. And that is like a good sign to be like, I should move on and do something else. Jason, you had a question about, have you considered doing a long form documentary? Well, sort of, like, I just think it'd be kind of a cool thing to do, right? But I just know that I would get so burnt out on it. Okay, cool. Yes, let's wrap it up. Thank you so much. Sorry for the time. Stuff. I'm going to leave the stage. Bye.